Internet Vikings World of Experts.
We're going to talk about how to work with hosting and what to think about, and also what we can do to prevent issues, as issues will arise when you host something. There will always be problems. And that's what we're trying to minimize here. But with that, let's start. And if there's anything, just write if there's a question in the chat box. And as I said, I've been the only thing I can is hosting. I've been working with that since 2004. And my background is, first I worked for a shared hosting, a web hosting company from 2005 to 2007. And with that, we merged 13 data centers into 2. We merged over 1,000 servers. We transported both from in Sweden and from Norway and so on. It was quite a challenging setup, but it was fun. I learned a lot. And with that, as of this, we also wanted to, what can we do and what other services is there? And we built a SaaS company called Stay Secure in 2008. It became the largest anti-spam company in Sweden, which was sold in 2014. And at the same time, me and Victor Gerlin founded Internet Vikings, what became Internet Vikings. And the goal was to become a premium provider within hosting into B2B, the B2B segment. And we wanted to provide a great service and wanted to have customers that wanted to get a little extra. With that, we also have started Home Security, which are working with IT security, Windshare, that does Google rank tracking. And this is, like I said, the only thing I can do, building B2B companies that helps providing good services online. Besides that, I'm having a family, so if you hear a noise in the background, it's probably my daughter that woke up. And it would be nice to hear, now we have 35 people here, where you guys are from and which countries are represented. I want this to be a very interactive presentation, and that we can, if there's an issue, we can discuss it and talk about things. So if you it would be lovely if someone could just write where you're from, where you live. I guess that most of you sit at home, as it's kind of rare to be at an office nowadays. And what you guys do and what kind of hosting you are currently using. So please feel free to write that in the chat box. See if I can get. I see that we have one guy from Barcelona, Christian at least. We have, it's a a happy affiliate. Then we have Robert from Germany, and Pontus that use both shared hosting and some cloud hosting. So it's a big spread all over Europe, and maybe we have some people from either Asia and the Americas as well. But really nice. But let's continue. Why is hosting so important? Hosting is if you have a factory, it's the factory. If you have a shop, then your hosting is your store. Then you must treat it that way. I've seen for the last 15 years that a lot of people don't treat your hosting as important as you should, because it is business critical. And you need to have, if you have good hosting, you have low latency, you will have a better reputation online. And with that, you have lower bounce rates, you have lower issues, you will have a higher income. But if you don't do that, if you have let's say 2-3 seconds loading time for your website, then you will have a higher bounce rate and your income will decline, because no one can get to your site. It's quite easy But I've seen so many cases with huge, very big e-commerce companies that doesn't understand it and they think they have other issues that they take care about, but this would be the single easy one to fix that would make a lot of money very easily. Let's see that we have some more people from that using Amazon, that using DigitalOcean. That's all great companies. And from Bosnia-Herzegovina. And if you look into hosting, there is the reason why I think there's so many people that doesn't look into this. It's so complex, and the reason why it's complex is because you have a lot of people trying to fix. So it's not too complicated for a technician, but as a manager, of someone that's taking decisions, it's kind of complex to understand where to go to. And if we look into hosting, you have, like from the start, the shared hosting that usually used for a blog. It could be used for like a small business, a non-profit organization that doesn't have that many issues, and that have that many visitors. And it's usually a very great support to set it all up. They will help you with your WordPress or Drupal or Joomla. And then you are going up to the cloud hosting. And cloud hosting really ranges from like the smallest server into like entire data centers. Like there is customers of, for example, Azure and Amazon that have like an entire data center for their own setup, but it's built on top of these big super clouds. On top of that, like instead of having a cloud solution, you can have a dedicated servers. That was like 15 years ago, before people were starting to use cloud hosting. People had the shared hosting and the dedicated servers. That was like the two things that we were renting out at the time. The dedicated servers is if you because of security reasons, like for example, some like credit card, if you are a merchant for credit card processing, you might need dedicated servers and that's also with your own hardware. So the difference between the dedicated servers and your own hardware is that the dedicated, that you have your hosting company that handles if there's a problem with the server. And if you have your own hardware, you need to deal with that yourself. One thing that's quite interesting that have been growing, I think, is the hybrid clouds. The hybrid clouds is that you probably have your own dedicated servers that runs a cloud platform. And you use that for your daily operations, like throughout the year. But when you have peak hours, like for example, for Black Friday, if you're an e-commerce, or if you are sending out a huge email campaign, then you might want to scale up your hosting within a few hours or a few days. And that's where you can offload some capacity into the public clouds. And it's a quite nice solution because you both get the price efficiency of the dedicated servers, and you get the scale-up solutions of the clouds. So we have a few e-commerce customers that use that for just to scale up and down in a few days a year or a few weeks a year. But always remember, there's no cloud. Cloud is only a marketing and a productification of a server. As everyone, if it's Internet Vikings, a shared hosting provider, Amazon, Azure, everyone uses the same Intel CPU, the same Samsung or Kingston memory, and probably the same Seagate hard drives. And with that, the only difference is, and probably they also use the same data centers. The only difference is the productification and the software on top of it. So the cloud software, the hardware is no difference as the shared hosting. And if we move into the cloud hosting, look at that even further, because it's everyone wants to go into the cloud. And I think it's a good thing, because then you can scale up. You don't need to worry about like a faulty hard drive, because your hosting provider, your cloud hosting provider, will handle that for you. And that's a good thing, because then your DevOps developers can focus on like what really like makes money for the company. But I would say like cloud hosting is not a sort of all problems. It's a solution for maybe 95% of all things out there. And there could be like where you shouldn't use the cloud hosting, as 95% of all the cloud hosting people still only use the virtual machines in, for example, EC2. There is no like fancy thing on top of it. They run a database on an EC2 instance, and that's just giving away so that you don't need to handle the hardware, and that's the most of the benefit that you're getting out of it. And you have to look through the fine print, because it can become very, very expensive. As when you scale up, it could look very cheap in the beginning, but when you get more traffic after a while, when you need more storage, more I/O operation, as it's called, like how fast your storage is, that's when these public clouds start to charge a lot of money for that. And for example, if you have a database that needs a lot of I/O capacity, or if you have a lot of traffic. And another interesting hosting niche that have came up for the last 10 years, like SaaS has been around for 15-20 years, but it's just there's a lot of other as a service acronyms that we would like to look into, because in some ways these are super efficient, and you need to know, like when you're buying hosting, you need to know when to use what. If you look at on-prem, that's like the basic, that you have a server in a data center, that you own the server, and that's about it. And that's, you don't own the physical data center, but you own the server within it. Then you need to take care about everything: the servers, the storage, the networking, virtualization if you're using that, and so on. But if you don't want to do that, you want your team to work on everything like the operating system and above, that's when you should have the infrastructure as a service. And this is more or less the EC2 instances of AWS, for example. They handle everything up to the operating system, and you handle the rest. And then you have a platform as a service, where you handle everything up to the application, where you run the application, probably in like a serverless environment, in some sort of container. That's when you are using. It's super efficient, and it's really been growing for the last 3 to 5 years, and it's going to be, I think, probably the new way, because you can do like rapid deployment. You can scale it up and down so much quicker than if you have your own on-prem server, for example. And then the last step is software as a service, where you can have. You don't need to handle anything, like the application, anything. You can have like a hosted, for example, MySQL server or MS SQL server. That is, you just need to connect to it, and they will handle the rest, and you will get an invoice like how many queries, like how much capacity you have used. Super efficient, and that goes also for all different types of hosting needs. And then if we look through what is proper hosting and what can happen, because what I would like to discuss a lot in this presentation is like what I would look into if I were buying hosting. what would I look into and what would I really focus on, and what is like a couple of easy things that can occur that we can mitigate. One thing is, of course, to something that looks very cheap in the beginning, you need to look into, okay, after 2 years, 3 years, how much would this cost me? Because if it becomes very expensive, then it might not be worth it. And that's something I would take into the consideration, like from the start. Do I really need this maybe overcomplicated or over optimized like setup? And with that, you also have, if you get too many issues, like you can't have like issues that you have a server that is getting full or not enough capacity. You have issues with some API. You have issues with SSL certificates. There's a lot of things that can happen, and that if something have happened once, then you need to figure out, okay, how can we handle so this doesn't happen again? And that's something that because it will, and you need to learn, and like next time you need to fix so it doesn't happen. And how can we avoid these kind of issues? How I see it, the most important thing within hosting is monitoring. And monitoring has become so much easier today than it was 10 years ago. Today there is great SaaS products that can help you with it. And if we look into hosting, you have like the standard, like checking if the web server, the HTTP and HTTPS web server is up and running. That's like the start. But let's say that works. What about order forms? I would set up, if I would have a site like internetvikings.com, then I would set up so that the order form, that I actually test the order form, that it sends the leads to the sales team, because otherwise it doesn't. There's no need to have the site if we can't collect leads, for example. Or if you have an e-commerce that sells something online, that you check that you have a payment solution that works, and do that maybe every hour, a few times an hour. Just because you will never notice that there's an issue with it unless you have a declining revenue, and that someone is emailing your support and say, okay, I can't pay for my merchandise. Another thing that we think should be still, this should be on a management level. This should be a report that a manager should get either from a hosting provider or from your DevOps technicians. That you do server monitoring, you do checking the storage capacity, you do CPU, so that you don't have you try only to have at least 50% of the CPU still available. Same thing with memory, that you have enough memory available. This is things that you can, if you do this correctly, check that, okay, that you don't overuse your storage, so the hard drive is getting full. It's so easy to check and clean up when you're up at 80%, than getting up to 100 and your site goes down. You also have what I would monitoring is SSL certificates. Both the main SSL certificate on your website, but also, I guess most people here use APIs, that you check your API, your databases, your connections to other parts of your website that might use HTTPS, because that's also where you need to renew your SSL certificates. And in the end of the day, I would also monitoring the latency. As if you're not monitoring latency, then you won't see if the site is have some issue, or if there is either getting DDoSed, or if there's some issue with the site. And also, it's super important for your SEO, your search engine optimization, and your user experience. Because if you don't have a quick site, people like will go to someone else. And what I would do as a monitoring is using any of these 3 SaaS products. Uptime.com is a very premium one. Same with Pingdom. And they just got bought by SolarWinds, and they are very big. Pingdom also have a lot of great tools, like free tools on their website that you just can go in and check for latency everywhere in the world to see if there's an issue with the site. And also Uptime Robot, that's a little bit more better priced, and but does the trick. So one other thing that it's so crucial when you do hosting is redundancy. There will always be issues within your website. It's like the same thing. Whatever you do when you're running your own business, there will always be issues that you need to handle and take care about. And what kind of different levels of redundancy is there, and what would you need to use in different cases? So what I would use for web applications, and what usually is used, is like a hot redundancy. So you have 2 web servers that runs your web application. And with that, you can use that to have a load balancer in front of it. You can distribute the load to one node, or take one down to do either maintenance, upgrades, but also do like continuously deployment and just deploy something into that one and then switch it back, because then you really get a fast deployment. We have customers using that because they don't want to go down when they do deployment. There are also like a hot-cold setup in terms of redundancy, and that's usually used for databases. Databases where you for example, don't want to run the backup on the master server. You want to use the backup on the slave one, on the cold one, because they have enough free capacity that can be used. So you use the main server, the main database server for the main site, and then you have a cold backup that you run backups on. You do checks, you use it for other maybe some BI work that you can use. And that's super efficient, so you don't need to run your own BI setup. You can use that within your cold database. And then we have the cold setup of redundancy, and that's, I would say, it's a secondary location where you push the data to, either through database replication, or you do it on a daily basis incrementally, or you send it once in a while. And that's usually a secondary location, probably also in a separate country, in a separate hosting provider. And with this, I would actually say that it's super important that you do this on especially now with the COVID-19 and the Corona situation, that you also, because some countries do the lockdown, and then people might not be able to go to the data center. That's why, and that could be the same thing for an entire country. That's why, and that could be the same thing for any provider. So then I would do to have it in different countries if it's super important to have it. One other thing that's so important within hosting is the backup. And backup haven't been handled in the way that it should, because backup should be within your routines. When you deploy new things, double check that the backup works after the deployment, both on a database level, but also on an application level. Like message queuing, is that backed up if there's an issue, or do we do the multiple servers? And I would have either weekly or monthly. I would really recommend to have a monthly routine, not only from a tech side, but also from a management side, to check that the backup works. And having a quality test of restoration, that you actually like put it back to see, okay, is our backup actually working? Because I've seen so many cases, and I've been in news so many times where people have had they thought they've had backup, and in the end of the day, when there's an issue, then they forgot to specify the new location for the new database when there were an upgrade, or the backup haven't been running, or there was some issue with it. So that's the kind of things. So, but the last tip I would give you is to the security, because it's also something that's so easy to do. It's all about like just doing the security updates. When there is an issue, for example, in WordPress, as in the Vikings, it's one of the largest WordPress hoster in Europe. Like, if there's an issue, then you should like if there's a security issue, then you should upgrade your WordPress, and that's something that people do after like a month, and within a month you're already hacked. Then it would take and cost a lot of money to get the hacker out of your system. So keep track of your security updates and upgrade it, and because that's the easiest thing. And then the second easiest is, does everyone need to have access to everything? And it's about seeing that, okay, who does everyone needs to have it? Because they not be the issue, but they might be compromised. And then the hacker can only get into a certain part of the network or the site. And with this, also do regular checkups, like penetration testing. There's a lot of great consultants out there that do that for quite small amount of money, just for a check, like, or do automated scannings for security. So redundancy, backup, and security is like three things I would really focus on. And when you have done that, when you actually have these things on the table, that you actually do it on like in your processes, you do it constantly and not forgetting about it. Like, how do you then, like, what tricks is it to lower the costs? Of course, if you have dedicated servers, your own hardware, or you are using more and more bandwidth, you should ask for discounts. Like every year, if, for example, if you have a dedicated server, after 3 years, you can usually get like 25 to 30% discount for that same server, because then either you want to upgrade to a new server, or because that server is probably a little bit old and you can get it at a cheaper price. One thing is also to switch to another provider. That's something that it's getting more and more easier to do it, because now with the containers, you get you don't need to run the operating system. You just need to move the application, only the application in the container. Then you can switch to another provider quite easily. And also use different providers for different things. You might use some provider for DDoS protection, one for as a CDN, and using CDN would maybe decrease your traffic costs by 60, 70%. And then DevOps efficiency. This is something that I put in. That it was from a friend that runs a big like e-commerce affiliate. It's like, what is the most efficient thing? Like, is it getting more servers or writing better code? And it's always a balance between that two. Okay, should we have like more developers to write better code to get the system more optimized, or should we just throw hardware on the problem and have more memory, more hardware, more storage, and solve it in that way? And that's something that I think should be on the table, so that maybe you can solve, instead of sitting and optimizing it, you can just get some more memory or a new server, and then you can just someone that works on that can get more time to do better things. And that comes back to like simple mistakes. And that one thing is to allow technicians to make business decisions. And it's about, like we talked about on the previous slide, to have technicians that makes, for example, they want to write the best code, the most optimized code. But maybe that's not the best solution for it. The best solution is to get more hardware, because doesn't make sense to optimize something that's already pretty optimized. And also pay attention to that you shouldn't go in different opinions, and different opinions means also different types of codes, like a code base and develop like programming languages and so on. And there's always different opinions within like a development community. And maybe you need to sit down and really do a good assessment. I've seen one company that I was helping that they were having a pretty good like dedicated server setup, but their technicians wanted to go into AWS, and the reason was, in the end of the day, just because that the technicians and the DevOps team wanted to get that on the CV and be able to go to AWS conferences and get a certificate, more than the company would benefit from it, because the solution was pretty stable, worked very well, but they wanted to make it better just by this, and it would cost this company like 3 times. And then one thing, it's also that you have someone to call if there's a problem. If you have a hosting provider, just have someone that you can call 24/7, because the problem usually happens when you don't think that it will, when there is like Christmas or any other public holiday. That's usually when the problem happens. And having someone to call, especially then in the middle of the night, when you want to go to sleep, but you need to fix this. And this also comes back to being dependent on one person, like having like a proper hosting company that you can actually call, and they know how to fix your problem within your software or your setup, because it's probably usually pretty easy fixed. You just need someone that understands the technical side that can fix it. And so that's like not being dependent on one person. I've seen this so many times that people like call me that have these kind of problems. And this is what I want to come back to. In this first example, we kind of that had this issue, and it was a friend. This was like 3 months ago, and he had a developer who couldn't really research the issue. There was an e-commerce site did like 8 million euro in revenue per year, and he's like, Rickard, can you please help me with this? The issue was that the cache files filled up the server, and if they would have had monitoring in the first place, they would have seen that before the site was down for a few hours. And they didn't have any support agreement with the current provider. They didn't have anyone to call at that Saturday to help them fix it. And it was quite tricky, because it was not, the hard drive was not full, but the I/O nodes on the file system was full. So it was quite tricky to find it. But when you know where to look, it was pretty easy. Solution by just deleting the cache files and just having a support agreement with the provider and setting up monitoring on the server, so that you get these alerts 3 weeks ahead that there's going to be the server is going to be full, and then you just fix it before there is an issue. Another one is I'm doing these kind of examples because I want to show that I guess a lot of people here have had these kind of issues and have probably seen something like this. And I want to say that you're not alone, and these things happen. So you just want to know how to handle it. This was like a few years ago. There were no capacity on the server. They had an e-commerce doing like a little bit north than 10 million euro per year. On the peak days, there were not the server didn't work. It was just going down all the time, and they couldn't get the orders in, and they lost a lot of money because of it. And the current provider, that they tried to talk to them, but they didn't respond. They didn't understand, and that there were like this kind of big issue, and they were not working proactively. So the solution was so easy, just setting up like a proper sized server that worked very well for them, and they were just correctly configured and monitor that and the application. If there was an issue, then it will be fixed before the site would actually go down. So super easy, didn't cost them that much more, and they on the next peak day they made like 50% more than they did the year before that. So they made some good money. This is also a very interesting thing. There was a startup company that had a very expensive cloud hosting. They had around 2 million active users in that app. They had a database running on Heroku and a front end on AWS. And it was probably very good when they started that company, because then it was pretty not that expensive. But when it grew, it cost them like 25K a month just for hosting of that. And they didn't make any money. There was like a free to use application. And what I advised them to was go from Heroku to another cloud provider for the database, because it was not that much queries. We just like Heroku was super expensive for them. And removing AWS as the front end and just another cloud provider. The reason I chose that and not fixing it within AWS would just then we would have the database and the application front end on the same provider. They saved around 75% and got the cost down to 6K a month. And this is something that we really worked on, and they were like super happy about it, and they were like, it was like very good for them. And one thing that I would really look into is to revisit your hosting annually, and both your hosting, but also all the checks around it. That you need to do this, because for most companies it's quite crucial within your organization and what you do. So that's something that I would really do, either annually or on a quarterly basis. Like during summer, it's always a good time to check it, because then you have some more time than during the spring and the fall. So that's what I wanted to show you. So like being on top of things and actually caring about hosting on a management level, not only on a technical level, is something that I would suggest everyone and anyone that have a crucial website. And also have someone to call 24/7. Any questions? Yeah, thank you. We got some submitted questions here when you sign up. Managed Kubernetes is something that we provide. Yes, we do. We have that in our VMware platform that you can run Kubernetes with master nodes and handle it. So yes, we do. And what do our company do? We do hosting. We are specialized on high availability hosting for hosting applications, websites, databases that needs to be up and running 24/7. And that's what we want to do. And that's like, I think there's so many more things to develop within the hosting, especially with all the containers and all the development that it's happening within the hosting industry, and have happened for the last 10 years with all the public cloud providers. Why is there such a difference in price between the different providers? I would say usually not that much difference in price if you compare the right things, but you can't compare things because hosting providers are so good at productifying it and not showing what it actually is included or not included, and that's usually the reason why it's the price looked differently, but it's not in the end of the day because they're just different things. So I wouldn't look what I need today, but I would also look at what I probably need in like 2 years, because that's what you will be paying, because after 2 years you don't want to switch. I also had a question from a friend that I always get, like, what is a lot of money for hosting? It's a very good question. And I would say a lot of money, it's over like 1,000, 2,000 euro a month. That's a lot of money for hosting. Even if you have a big site, you can host a very big site for that money. And do I need someone to manage my server on the cloud? Yeah, you need. Even if you are using AWS like EC2, it's still a server. You still have an operating system. You need to do upgrades. You need to do updates and handle it. So yes, you need to. And is it possible to buy freedom from problems? Yes, if you invest a lot of things in redundancy and so on, but there will always be issues. Even like huge providers like Cloudflare had an issue with their network just a few months ago. They were down for, I don't know, half an hour or something. So yes, you need to, there will be issues, and you can pay some money to get remove 99% of it, but there will always be some issue that you need to be able to act quickly on. And the last one we've already been talking about. Then I would say thank you to everyone.
Do not miss our future podcasts. Subscribe now.